Hello and welcome to Rob's Fitness channel. About 2 months ago, I had a total right hip arthroplasty, which is a hip replacement. I had gotten to a point where I consistently had some type of pain in my right leg, whether it was in the knee, calf, glute, or hip itself. Not every single second or every single day, but quite a lot of the time. I do walk a lot at work, and while at the start of a shift I would feel discomfort, after the first hour or so it wouldn't be as bad. However, by the end of the shift, I'd be limping and there'd be a pain in at least one area of my right leg. Despite all these issues with my right leg, I would still do leg workouts at the gym. When I would do leg exercises like hack squats or leg presses, the right leg felt like it wasn't tracking the right way. Instead, it was jutting out to the side. Deadlifts and RDLs became very uncomfortable to do as well, and I stopped doing them altogether. Basically, none of these exercises felt right for me, and they caused pinching and pain in my right leg. All this time I figured, or at least I hoped, I just had a lingering injury, and at one point had my knee x-rayed as I would get a lot of pain in that area, and it showed no injury. As time progressed, my right leg pain and discomfort continued and slowly got worse. Finally, last fall, I got x-rays on the right hip and got the diagnosis: severe hip osteoarthritis. At first, I wasn't in a hurry to get the hip replacement I was told I needed. I'd already been living with the pain for a couple of years, and some days it didn't bother me as much as others. I was also going to have to take at least a month off work. However, I had seen my younger brother recover well from having both of his hips replaced, so I knew I would feel so much better once I got it done and got through recovery. My lower back also started hurting from overcompensating while I was walking, which accelerated my decision to finally schedule surgery. So I went ahead and got the hip replacement. I got there early in the morning, got the procedure done. About an hour after waking up, they had me walking around with a walker and even testing a 3-step stairway in case I had to use stairs at home. By noon that day, I was home and on the road to recovery. I'm making this video to show how much progress can be made in only a couple of months' time after a surgery like this. I'll go into what I did at first, getting back to the gym a few days after surgery, to what I've progressed to since that first week. The thing about a hip replacement is that, while rest is extremely important, moving is of equal importance. The first days after surgery were dedicated to rest and taking short walks using a walker. Getting some movement is essential in the healing process, as all the rest is needed but also causes stiffness and tightness. Even with prescription meds, there's also a chance of blood clots after surgery, so you gotta move. I did go through a quick home arm workout with a resistance band the day after my surgery. I needed to see if I could pull it off. It was a very basic workout as I looped the band under the foot of my good leg and did some curls and triceps extensions for super high reps. I made sure my walker was right there if I lost balance, and even tried some partial dips on it, being sure to keep my feet close to the floor. This put my mind at ease as to how disabled I would be in the short term, as it made me feel like I'd be back in no time. I had a handful of in-house physical therapy sessions in the first couple of weeks, and was given a basic movement routine to follow for my leg. Many of these simple exercises were done while sitting or lying down. These including moving my feet back and forth and sliding my heel until my knee was slightly bent. I also had some standing moves I could do while gripping my walker, like curling the leg and raising the leg. These were done to help prevent blood clots and start on the journey to regaining strength and mobility. It's hard to convey how limited I was at first. I had to use a raised toilet seat for Christ's sakes. I also couldn't put a sock on without this contraption called a sock aid. As you can imagine, I couldn't get a shoe on either without assistance. A shoehorn came in handy here, and I'd have to have the shoe loosely tied before getting it on my foot, as I couldn't get down to do that either. Driving was another seemingly simple daily activity I couldn't do, so I wasn't going anywhere without help. Fortunately, there is a Planet Fitness right down the road, so on day 4 after surgery, I walked over there with my walker to see how a short workout would go. This workout consisted entirely of seated machine, chest, and shoulder exercises, done with very light weight and high reps. With the level of soreness I had at this point, I was very careful about getting into the seated position on the machines. As far as rep range goes, I was going for 25 to 30 each set and not going all out. That first workout went well, so I continued on my routine, sticking with the very light weights and high reps. I did only 2 or 3 exercises per muscle group and 3 sets per exercise. At least 15 reps were done per exercise, and I even considered that too heavy at the time. I followed my normal split routine with a chest-shoulder day, a back day, and an arm day. Of course, the legs weren't getting trained outside of short walks with a walker and the small movements I was doing at home, though I did try some super light single leg extensions quite early on. It was about a week after surgery before I graduated to a cane to help me walk, and within a few days of that I gave driving a try. It was a bit uncomfortable at first, but I didn't have to go very far to where I wanted to go. I can handle only so much Planet Fitness, and I was ready to get back to my preferred gyms. At this point, I also started outpatient physical therapy to regain strength and mobility in my hip and lower body in general. Along with going to PT, I was given a short routine to follow 2 or 3 times a day that included lying hip thrusts, unilateral leg raises, and standing kickouts to the back and out to the side. This routine has been added to over time, and I still go through it a couple times each day. Once I felt confident walking without assistance, I still brought my cane along just in case, and then tried to avoid using it, or used it just a little after walking more than usual. Beyond lowering the weights and upping the reps, there were other modifications I had to make to my routine. This depended on which muscle group I was training, as some needed more changes than others. For instance, standing and holding weights was a no-go. I'm saying that I wasn't even going to use 20-pound dumbbells for isolation exercises, much less the 100-pounders that I would use for dumbbell bench presses. I also wasn't going to bend forward very far for the first month after surgery, so there was no chance I was doing an exercise like the bent over row. Even grabbing weight to put on a machine would make me wince, even if it was just a 25, so I'd be very slow and careful about doing that, and try to use machines with weight stacks when I could. I could still use free weights with a barbell while lying on a bench, so I did some flat and inclined bench presses with a pittance of the weight I could normally use. I also wasn't doing any exercises that involved getting onto the floor, mostly because I wasn't really sure if I'd be able to get up without plenty of pain being involved. Core exercises were most affected by this, so I would do them while lying on a bench if it was possible. Here I'm going to quickly go through some of the changes I had to make to each muscle group for the first few weeks post-hip replacement. Some workouts had to be almost completely overhauled, while others only needed minimal mods. Some of the biggest changes in my routine involved rowing exercises. Free weight rows are usually the cornerstone exercise of my upper back workouts, and an alternative was needed. To take my hips out of the exercise and avoid bending forward, I started using chest-supported row machines. This was perfect as I could concentrate on form without risking anything catastrophic. In fact, I found that if anything, I've been underutilizing these types of machines and will keep them in my routine. When I got past the first month post-surgery, I started using machines that had me bending forward while still providing chest support when I rowed. My next mini milestone was to use a T-bar row machine with no chest support. By now I felt I had enough mobility and strength back in my hip and was confident I could bend forward while holding and rowing weight. Another week or so after this, I finally tried classic bent over rows with light weight. This felt great and I was able to add more weight after the initial set. I added landmine rows back into my routine shortly thereafter. I will readily now admit that it feels so much better doing free weight rows on my repaired hip than it did pre-surgery. While rowing exercises for the back required plenty of changes, pull-ups and pull-downs really didn't need any modifications. They weren't going to affect my hip other than to be careful when I was dropping from a pull-up bar. And I was doing a few pull-ups in my initial post-surgery workouts. I didn't use my dip belt to add weight for pull-ups until I felt ready to, which was about a month or so after surgery. The biggest change to my chest workouts at first was the inability to use dumbbells for flat or inclined presses. I could do the barbell versions just fine though, albeit with less weight than usual at first. I would use seated chest press machines as alternative to the dumbbells. Once again, it was just a matter of time to heal before I could grab a pair of heavy dumbbells and bench with them. Now it doesn't bother me at all, and it actually feels better as I'm not walking around on an arthritic hip while handling the weights. I also avoided getting down to the floor for my favorite versions of the push-up until I was ready. Once I felt good enough, I started practicing pseudo planche push-ups. I had to give myself more time before going back to Tyson push-ups, as they have you pushing off a wall using the legs. I'm finally back to doing them now. Shoulder workouts were almost exclusively done with seated machines for the first few weeks after my hip replacement. This included machine overhead presses and lateral raises. I've worked my way back to the free weight versions of these exercises, as well as standing landmine presses. The final hurdle for shoulders was to get back to doing pike push-ups and a few handstand push-ups against a wall, with the difference being that I don't feel pain and pinching in my hip like I used to while doing them. Arm workouts may not require as much weight as workouts for larger muscle groups, but I still had to rely mostly on machine and cable exercises in my post-surgical condition. I could at least do chin-ups for the biceps, though it was a minute before I added weight to them. I would start with chin-ups before doing a few seated machine and cable exercises for the bis. It wasn't long before I could handle light dumbbells for seated curls, and before I knew it, I was back to standing dumbbell and barbell curls. Triceps workouts didn't require a ton of changes, as I could still do reverse grip bench presses, unweighted dips, and cable exercises for them. However, triceps-focused push-up exercises and skull crushers were out. By now, I've worked my way back to these exercises. Surprisingly, I could still do some of my favorite core moves shortly after surgery. I tried a dragon flag on a bench just a week after, and I was able to hold it without being in a ton of pain. I really thought I'd feel it in my hip, but that just wasn't the case. When I was still using a cane, I tried a human flag and was able to do it, albeit not for very long. I had to be more careful with my hip here, especially when returning my feet to the floor from the human flag. On both of these core hold moves, I wasn't at my best, and have slowly worked my way back to my previous levels. My right leg no longer looks off a bit while doing them either, as it now straightens out like it couldn't before. For the most part, I could still do leg raises, just not past a 90-degree angle where the hips would be raised. If I was doing hanging leg raises, I'd be cautious about dropping to the floor on my good leg, even if it was just a few inches. The Bosu bench was my preferred leg raise spot anyway. Now I've gotten back to being able to do some leg raises where I bring the feet all the way up to the bar to really test my core. I've even been able to do some reps like this out to the side, which was pretty much impossible before getting my hip repaired. It goes to show that on some exercises I'll be able to go beyond my previous limits. The one core exercise I count as one of my favorites I couldn't do for a while is the side bend on a slanted hyperextension bench. This is for a completely different reason than my inability to do any other exercise. On a slanted bench, I couldn't bear to lie my weight against the bench padding on my right side, as that's where my surgical incision is. On my left side, I could do them just fine. I had to wait this one out until I no longer felt it as much in my right hip, which did take some time. Eventually, I was able to comfortably do them, at least more comfortably than before. As to this day, I can still feel a smidge of tenderness in the incision area if it's pressed into. I can also hold extra weight on my slanted side bends now, though I still have to position myself to avoid the ever-decreasing tender area. The most obvious area of the body that I had to modify my workouts for were the legs and other lower body muscles. The first 2 weeks after surgery were no joke. There wasn't much I could do with my legs besides taking short walks with a walker or cane. I could barely get my leg up on my bed to lie down. When I did get to the point where I wanted to try some leg work, it was very limited. I started out with very light unilateral leg extensions and standing leg curls. My right leg didn't have much strength, and I would start with the weaker leg and go for high reps with pauses at the top of some reps. I couldn't do any of my regular lower back exercises either, so I would get on the back extension machines that I never normally use. Once again, very lightweight for very high reps was on the docket. I gave myself a test on the unilateral leg press a few weeks after surgery. This was done with super lightweight. I just added a 25 to each side. It was to check my range of motion more than anything, and let me tell you, it wasn't very much on my right leg. Eventually, I was able to use more weight on leg isolation exercises. I'm now taking it workout by workout, gradually increasing the resistance as my right leg feels better and my strength increases. For the lower back, I started doing hyperextensions on a slanted bench when I was able to bend at the waist at a 90-degree angle, which was about a month after surgery. I took it easy at first, not going all out or using any extra weight. Now I'm back to grabbing 90 pounds or more and doing them with no soreness. I also tried the unilateral leg press again, and I could use a lot more than my previous attempt, though the strength of the right leg is still not near the level of the left leg. The left leg could still handle 45 more pounds for twice as many reps, so it's going to take some time to get the right leg all the way back. Recently, I have gotten back to using weight on hip thrust machines and also tried a squat machine. They felt pretty good, but again it's taking some more time for the muscles in the right leg and hip to come back. On the other hand, before surgery the right hip area would pinch and be painful on a lot of leg exercises, and it really wasn't doing any real lifting as it wasn't coming straight into my body, more out to the side. This could mean I may actually get stronger than before on some exercises, which would be nice, though I won't overdo it either. While my recovery is still a work in progress, as I'm not all the way back, I made this video to show how much improvement can be made in just 2 months. Don't get me wrong, being a seasoned lifter made getting back to where I was before that much easier. At some point in the future, I'll have to revisit how everything is going, especially when it comes to regaining leg strength and mobility. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, as I will continue releasing new content featuring your favorite exercises and possibly other fitness topics. Peace out.